The massive human ship called Harmony's Edge moved slowly through the dark space between stars. Captain Lee Tae-ho stood on the bridge watching the distant lights of Nexus Prime Station growing larger on the main screen. The station looked like a giant metal flower floating in the void, with dozens of docking arms reaching out in all directions. "How much longer until we arrive?" asked Ambassador Park Ji-won as she walked onto the bridge. She was a tall woman with sharp eyes and gray, hair tied back in a simple knot. She had spent 20 years learning to talk with alien species and making peace deals across the galaxy. "About 4 hours, Ambassador," Captain Lee replied. He was younger than Park, but had already commanded 3 different starships. His dark uniform was perfectly clean, and his voice stayed calm even when things got dangerous. "The station controllers say everything is ready for the peace talks." Park nodded and looked at the screen. Somewhere on that station, representatives from 12 different alien species were waiting. They all hoped humans could help stop the Vorthak Empire from conquering more worlds. The Vorthak had been growing stronger for months, taking over planets and making slaves of entire populations. "Are you nervous about meeting with so many species at once?" asked Dr. Han So-young as she joined them on the bridge. She was the team's expert on alien minds and behaviors. Her job was to help humans understand how different species think and act. "A little," Park admitted. "The Vorthak have scared everyone. Some species want to fight back, others want to hide, and a few think they should just surrender. Getting them all to agree on anything will be very hard." Captain Lee checked his instruments. "I'm getting some strange readings on long-range sensors. There are more ships in this area than there should be." Dr. Han moved to a nearby console and started working. "Maybe other species sent extra security. Everyone is worried about Vorthak attacks." The bridge crew continued their work as Harmony's Edge got closer to Nexus Prime. The ship carried not just diplomats but also scientists, doctors, and cultural experts. Humans had only been part of galactic politics for 50 years, but they had earned respect by being fair and honest in their dealings. Lieutenant Commander Choi Min-ho walked onto the bridge carrying a datapad. He was in charge of ship security and had been studying reports about Vorthak military tactics. "Captain, I've been looking at the sensor data. Those ships out there aren't just extra security. They're Vorthak warships." Everyone on the bridge stopped what they were doing. Captain Lee's face became very serious. "How many ships?" "At least 20 that I can see clearly. Probably more hiding behind the station or using stealth technology." Choi's voice was steady, but his eyes showed concern. "They're positioned in a perfect circle around Nexus Prime. No one can get in or out without going through them." Ambassador Park felt her stomach drop. "This isn't good. If the Vorthak are here in force, they're not planning to talk peacefully." Suddenly, the communication system made a loud beeping sound. A voice came through the speakers, but it wasn't from Nexus Prime Station Control. The voice was deep and harsh, speaking the common galactic language with a thick accent. "Human vessel, this is Commander Krextar of the Vorthak Imperial Fleet. You will stop your approach immediately and prepare to receive our demands." Captain Lee looked at his crew, then pressed the communication button. "This is Captain Lee Tae-ho of the Earthship Harmony's Edge. We are here for scheduled peace negotiations. Please explain why Vorthak warships are surrounding a neutral station. Sound like laughter came through the speakers, but it was cold and mean. "Peace negotiations? How amusing. There will be no negotiations today, human. We have taken control of Nexus Prime Station. Every alien representative inside is now our prisoner." The bridge became completely silent. Dr. Han's face went pale. Ambassador Park closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them with a hard expression. "What do you want?" Captain Lee asked, though he already suspected the answer would be bad. "We want humanity to stop interfering in Vorthak expansion. You will order all human military ships to leave the border worlds immediately. You will also give us the plans for your new shield technology. In return, we might let our prisoners live." Lieutenant Commander Choi was already working at his station, trying to get more information about the situation. He looked up with a grim expression. "Captain, I'm detecting life signs from over 300 beings inside the station. Representatives from 12 species, plus their staffs and station workers. How long do we have to decide?" Ambassador Park asked. 72 hours, Commander Krextar replied. If you do not agree to our terms by then, we will begin executing prisoners. We will start with the species that have been most helpful to humanity. Perhaps watching your friends die will help you make the right choice. The communication ended with a sharp click. The bridge stayed quiet for several long seconds. Finally, Captain Lee spoke. Options? We could try to contact Earth Command, suggested Dr. Han. Ask for instructions on how to handle this. The communication delay is 6 hours each way, Choi pointed out. By the time we get a response, half the deadline will be gone. Ambassador Park was thinking hard. She had dealt with hostage situations before, but never on this scale. The Vorthak think they understand humans. They believe we'll give them what they want to save innocent lives. That's how most species would react. Most species would be smart to react that way, Dr. Han said quietly. 300 lives are worth more than military positions or technology. Are they? Park asked. If we give the Vorthak what they want now, how many more species will they attack next month? How many worlds will they conquer because we made them stronger? Captain Lee was already making his decision. I'm sending a message to Earth Command immediately, but I think I know what they'll say. What's that? Asked Choi. Humans don't negotiate with terrorists. We never have, and we won't start now, even if the stakes are higher than they've ever been before. As Harmony's Edge held position in space, surrounded by enemy warships, the crew prepared for the most difficult 72 hours of their lives. 300 innocent beings were counting on them, but giving in to demands might doom thousands more. The choice between saving lives today and preventing greater suffering tomorrow would test everything humans believed about right and wrong. 6 hours later, the response from Earth Command arrived at Harmony's Edge. Captain Lee Tae-ho read the message 3 times before calling his senior officers to the main conference room. The room was small and simple, with a round table surrounded by chairs and a large screen on one wall. Ambassador Park Ji-won entered first, followed by Dr. Han So-young and Lieutenant Commander Choi Min-ho. They all looked tired. None of them had slept since receiving the Vorthak demands. Earth Command has made their decision, Captain Lee said without any introduction. He pressed a button, and Admiral Kim Do-yoon appeared on the screen. She was an older woman with short white hair and the kind of face that had seen many battles. Captain Lee, Ambassador Park, and crew of Harmony's Edge, Admiral Kim began. Her voice was strong and clear. We have reviewed the situation at Nexus Prime. The Vorthak Empire has committed an act of terrorism against innocent beings from multiple species. They believe that by threatening lives, they can force humanity to abandon our allies and give up our defensive technology. Ambassador Park leaned forward in her chair. She had worked with Admiral Kim before and knew the woman never made decisions lightly. After discussing this matter with the Human Defense Council and the Earth government, our position is clear. Admiral Kim continued. Humanity does not negotiate with terrorists. We will not abandon our allies in the border worlds. We will not hand over our shield technology to an aggressive empire that will use it to conquer more innocent people. Dr. Han spoke up. Admiral, what about the hostages? 300 beings will die if we don't give the Vorthak what they want. Admiral Kim's expression became even more serious. Dr. Han, I understand your concern for those lives. Every person on that station matters. But if we give in to these demands, the Vorthak will know they can control us by threatening innocence. They will take more hostages next month, and the month after that. Eventually, thousands more will die because we showed weakness today. Lieutenant Commander Choi was studying a tactical display on his tablet. Admiral, are we planning a rescue operation? Yes, Commander Choi. The entire human fleet is being mobilized as we speak. Every available ship is heading toward your location, but a direct assault on Nexus Prime would likely result in the deaths of all hostages before we could save them. Captain. Lee nodded slowly. So what's the plan? Ambassador Park, you're going to enter the station. Everyone at the table looked surprised. Ambassador Park raised her eyebrows. I'm going to what? You're going to request a meeting with the Vorthak commander. Tell them you want to discuss surrender terms. The Vorthak will think they're winning, so they'll agree to meet with you, Doctor." Han shook her head. "That's incredibly dangerous. If they discover Park isn't really there to surrender, they'll kill her along with the other hostages." "The risk is real," Admiral Kim admitted. "But Ambassador Park has skills that make her perfect for this mission, skills that aren't in her official files." Park looked uncomfortable. "Admiral, I haven't done that kind of work in 15 years. "I know, but Lieutenant Colonel Yoon Jae-sung and his special operations team are already on their way. They'll accompany you to the station hidden in your diplomatic shuttle. While you keep the Vorthak busy with fake negotiations, Yoon's team will locate and rescue the hostages." Captain Lee was starting to understand the plan. "How long do we have?" "The Vorthak deadline is in 66 hours. Our fleet will arrive in 48 hours. That gives you 18 hours to get everyone off that station before the real fighting starts." The communication ended, and the conference room became quiet. Finally, Ambassador Park spoke. "Well, this isn't exactly what I expected when I signed up to be a diplomat. Are you really qualified for this kind of mission?" Dr. Han asked with concern. Park smiled for the first time in hours, but it wasn't a happy smile. "Before I became a diplomat, I spent 10 years in human special forces. I was very good at getting into places where I wasn't supposed to be." Lieutenant Commander Choi looked impressed. "I never would have guessed." That was the point. The best diplomats understand both war and peace. Sometimes you need to know how to fight in order to make peace possible. Dr. Han was still worried. What if the Vorthak commander suspects something? What if he doesn't believe you're there to surrender? "Then, I'll have to be very convincing," Park replied. "The key is to give them what they expect to see. They think humans are soft because we try to solve problems with words instead of weapons. They believe we'll sacrifice our principles to save innocent lives." "Won't we?" Dr. Han asked quietly. Captain Lee answered, "No, Dr. Han. We'll sacrifice ourselves to save innocent lives. That's different." Over the next 12 hours, Harmony's Edge became very busy. Ambassador Park spent time reviewing Vorthak culture and psychology with Dr. Han. She needed to understand exactly how to act, to convince them she was defeated and ready to surrender. Lieutenant Commander Choi worked with the ship's engineers to modify Park's diplomatic shuttle. They added hidden compartments and stealth equipment that would allow a small team of soldiers to reach the station undetected. Captain Lee coordinated with other human ships in the area. 3 more vessels had arrived to provide support, though they stayed far enough away to avoid provoking the Vorthak fleet. During this time, representatives from several alien species contacted Harmony's Edge. They begged the humans to reconsider their position. A Zalani ambassador called Captain Lee with tears in her voice. "Please, Captain, my daughter is on that station. She's only there because she wanted to help make peace between our peoples. If you don't give the Vorthak what they want, she'll die for nothing." Captain Lee felt the weight of every conversation like this. "Ambassador Tella, I understand your pain, but if we surrender to terrorists now, how many daughters will die in future attacks? How many worlds will the Vorthak conquer because we made them stronger?" "I don't care about future attacks," Tella cried. "I care about my daughter." "So do I," Captain Lee replied gently. "That's why we're going to save her." When the call ended, Dr. Han looked at Captain Lee with respect. "That must have been very hard." It was. But making hard choices is why humans are trusted with missions like this. Other species think with their hearts, which is good most of the time. But sometimes you need to think with your head, even when your heart is breaking. As the deadline approached, Ambassador Park prepared for the most dangerous diplomatic mission of her career. She would walk into a station full of armed terrorists and convince them she was ready to betray everything humanity stood for. The success of her performance would determine whether 300 innocent beings lived or died. Ambassador Park Ji-won sat in the pilot seat of her diplomatic shuttle, watching Nexus Prime Station grow larger through the front window. Her heart was beating fast, but her hands were steady on the controls. Behind her, hidden in special compartments, built into the shuttle's walls, 5 human soldiers waited in complete silence. Lieutenant Colonel Yoon Jae-sung was the team leader. He had served in special operations for 12 years and had never failed a rescue mission. With him were Sergeant Kim Bo-ra, an explosives expert, Corporal Lee Min-soo, a computer specialist, Private Song Woo-jin, a medical officer, and Private Nam Hye-jin, a communications expert. Vorthak Station Control. This is Ambassador Park Ji-won. Requesting permission to dock, Park said into her radio. She made her voice sound tired and defeated. I'm here to discuss surrender terms with Commander Krextar. The response came quickly. Human shuttle, you are cleared to dock at Bay 7. Any weapons aboard your vessel will result in immediate execution of 10 hostages. Understood. I carry no weapons, Park lied smoothly. The soldiers behind her were armed with the latest human military equipment, but it was all hidden behind advanced stealth technology. As the shuttle approached the docking bay, Park activated a hidden switch. The compartments holding the soldiers became completely invisible to any scanning equipment. Even if the Vorthak searched the shuttle, they would find nothing. The docking process was smooth and quick. Park felt the shuttle settle into place with a soft bump. She took a deep breath and prepared to become the best actress of her life. Remember, everyone, she whispered to the hidden soldiers. Wait for my signal. The word is disappointed. When you hear me say that word, you'll know it's time to move. 2 Vorthak guards were waiting when Park stepped out of her shuttle. They were tall creatures with gray skin and 4 arms. Their faces looked like a cross between a lizard and an insect. Both carried energy weapons that could kill a human with one shot. Follow us, one guard said in broken common language. Commander waits for you. Park walked between the guards through the station corridors. Nexus Prime was normally a beautiful place where many different species came to trade and make agreements. Now it felt cold and threatening. Vorthak soldiers stood at every intersection watching everything with suspicious eyes. As they walked, Park counted the guards and memorized the layout of the station. She had studied the maps, but seeing the real thing was different. She noticed that most of the Vorthak forces were concentrated near the central hub, where the hostages were being kept. Meanwhile, back in the shuttle, Lieutenant Colonel Yoon and his team were preparing to move. They waited 15 minutes after Park left, then carefully opened their hidden compartments. Bo-ra, you're with me, Yoon whispered. We'll head toward the power control room. Min-soo, take Woo-jin and find the computer core. We need to access the station's internal systems. Ye-jin, establish communication with the fleet and monitor Vorthak radio traffic. The soldiers moved like shadows through the station's maintenance tunnels. Human special forces trained for years to move silently in zero gravity and tight spaces. The Vorthak had never seen anything like them. Sergeant Kim Bo-ra was studying the station's power systems when she made an important discovery. Colonel, look at this, she whispered, pointing to a power distribution panel. The Vorthak have routed all power to the central hub and the docking bays, but they left the emergency systems on the old backup power. Yoon examined the panel carefully. What does that mean? It means we can cut power to the artificial gravity in specific sections without affecting life support. The Vorthak will be floating helplessly, but the hostages will still be able to breathe. In the computer core, Corporal Lee Min-soo was having his own success. The Vorthak had taken control of the station's main systems, but they didn't understand human-designed security protocols. Min-soo found a way to access the internal sensors without triggering any alarms. I can see where all the hostages are being held, he reported through his communicator. They're all in Conference Hall Alpha, just like we thought, but there are more guards than expected. At least 30 Vorthak soldiers. Private Song Woo-jin was monitoring the life signs of all hostages. Most of them appear to be in good health, but several are showing signs of stress and dehydration. We need to get them out soon. While her team worked, Ambassador Park was meeting with Commander Krextar in his temporary command center. The Vorthak commander was even larger than his guards, with scarred skin and cold yellow eyes. So, the famous human diplomat has come to surrender, Krextar said with satisfaction. I must admit, I expected you to resist longer. Park forced herself to look defeated. My government has decided that the lives of innocent beings are more important than our military positions. We're prepared to discuss your terms. Discuss? Krekstar laughed. There is nothing to discuss. You will give us everything we demanded, or your friends will die. It's very simple. I understand your position, Park said carefully. But I need to see the hostages first. My government wants proof that they're all still alive before we agree to anything. Krekstar's eyes narrowed. You think we would lie about this? Of course not, Park replied quickly. But my superiors are very careful about these things. They want me to personally verify the condition of all hostages before I can authorize the transfer of our shield technology. The Vorthak commander thought about this for a moment. Very well, you may see them. But you will be watched at all times, and any attempt to communicate with the prisoners will result in immediate executions. As they walked toward Conference Hall Alpha, Park felt her heart rate increase. She was about to see 300 frightened beings who were counting on her to save them. She hoped her team was ready. The hall was huge, designed to hold meetings between many different species. Now it was a prison. Beings from 12 different worlds sat or stood in small groups, surrounded by armed Vorthak guards. Some looked terrified. Others appeared angry, but all of them looked tired. Park recognized several faces from previous diplomatic meetings. There was Ambassador Tella's daughter from the Zelani delegation, looking scared but unharmed. The Karathi trade representative sat with his head in his hands. 3 young Nixari scientists huddled together near one wall. As you can see, they are all alive, Krekstar said proudly. For now. Park nodded slowly, then said the words that would start the rescue. I have to say, Commander, I'm very disappointed in how this situation has developed. The word disappointed echoed through the hall, and Park knew that somewhere in the station 5 human soldiers had just received their signal to begin the most important mission of their lives. The moment Ambassador Park said the word disappointed, everything changed on Nexus Prime Station. In the power control room, Sergeant Kim Bora's fingers moved quickly across the control panel. She had spent hours studying the station's systems and knew exactly which switches to flip. Cutting artificial gravity to sections 4 through 8 in 3, 2, 1, she whispered into her communicator. Suddenly, 30 Vorthak guards in Conference Hall Alpha found themselves floating helplessly. In the air, their heavy bodies, designed for a world with strong gravity, spun and twisted as they tried to understand what was happening. The energy weapons in their hands became difficult to aim as they tumbled through the space. The hostages, who had been sitting or lying down, were also affected by the gravity loss. But Ambassador Park had been ready for this moment. During her years in Special Forces, she had trained extensively in zero-gravity combat. Everyone stay calm and hold on to something solid, Park shouted to the hostages as she moved smoothly through the floating chaos. Her diplomatic clothes hid a combat suit designed for exactly this situation. She reached the nearest Vorthak guard and struck him unconscious before he could figure out how to fire his weapon properly. Commander Krekstar was bigger and stronger than his soldiers, but even he struggled in the zero-gravity environment. What is happening? He roared as he spun slowly through the air near the ceiling. Humans don't negotiate with terrorists, Park replied as she kicked off a wall and glided toward another guard. But we do rescue hostages. Throughout the station, Lieutenant Colonel Yoon's team was moving into action. The loss of gravity in specific sections created exactly the advantage they needed. Yoon and his soldiers could move perfectly in zero-gravity while their enemies floundered helplessly. Private Nam Hee-jin had been monitoring Vorthak communications and heard their panic. They're calling for backup from their ships, she reported, but it will take at least 20 minutes for additional forces to dock and reach the central hub. 20 minutes is all we need, Yoon replied as he and Sergeant Bora entered Conference Hall Alpha through a maintenance hatch. The sight that greeted them was exactly what they had hoped for. Vorthak guards were floating everywhere, unable to coordinate their response. Corporal Lee Min-soo had taken control of the station's communication system. His voice suddenly came through every speaker on Nexus Prime. Attention all hostages. This is the human rescue team. Move to the walls and hold on tight. Do not resist the human soldiers who are coming to help you. The hostages, who had been confused and frightened by the sudden gravity loss, began to understand what was happening. Hope appeared on their faces for the first time in days. Ambassador Tella's daughter, a young Zilani woman named Kira, was floating near a wall when she saw Ambassador Park fighting 3 Vorthak guards at once. "The humans came for us," she whispered to the Karathi trade representative floating beside her. "I never doubted they would," the older alien replied, though his voice shook with emotion. In the center of the hall, Commander Krextar had managed to grab onto a support beam and was trying to aim his weapon at the hostages. "If I cannot have victory, I will have revenge," he snarled. But Lieutenant Colonel Yoon had been watching the Vorthak commander carefully. The moment Krextar raised his weapon, Yoon pushed off from the floor and flew straight at him. The two fighters collided in midair and Krextar's weapon spun away into the darkness. "You cannot stop the Vorthak Empire," Krextar growled as he tried to wrap his 4 arms around Yoon. "Maybe not," Yoon replied as he broke free from the alien's grip. "But we can stop you." Meanwhile, Private Song Woo Jin was helping injured hostages move toward the escape pods. Several beings had been hurt during their captivity, and the zero gravity made their movement difficult. Song's medical training helped him guide them safely through the floating chaos. Sergeant Bo-Ra had found the manual controls for the escape pod bay doors. "Colonel, I can open the escape routes, but once I do, the Vorthak ships outside will know what's happening." "Do it," Yoon ordered as he dodged another attack from Commander Krextar. "Nam, contact Captain Lee. Tell him we need the fleet now. Private." Nam quickly sent the emergency signal to Harmony's Edge. Captain Lee Tae-ho had been waiting for this moment. The moment his communication officer received the rescue signal, he activated the final part of the human plan. "All ships, this is Captain Lee. Execute Operation Thunder. Repeat, execute Operation Thunder." Far from Nexus Prime, the human fleet had been waiting in what appeared to be a full retreat. For the past 6 hours, human ships had been moving away from the station, making the Vorthak believe they had given up on any rescue attempt. But this retreat was a carefully planned deception. Admiral Kim Da-eun had positioned her ships in a formation that looked like withdrawal, but was actually preparation for a coordinated attack. The human vessels had been using the time to charge their weapons and plan their assault routes. "All ships jump to attack positions," Admiral Kim ordered from her flagship Indomitable. 12 human warships suddenly appeared around Nexus Prime, having used their advanced engines to travel faster than the Vorthak thought possible. The alien fleet, which had been relaxed and confident, found themselves surrounded and outmaneuvered. The Vorthak ship captains tried to respond, but human tactical planning proved superior. Each human vessel knew exactly where to attack for maximum effect. The aliens had arranged their ships to prevent escape from the station, but this positioning made them vulnerable to a coordinated assault. Back on the station, the escape pods were launching one after another. Ambassador Park personally helped load each pod with rescued hostages. Her diplomatic training had taught her to speak several alien languages, which helped calm the frightened beings. "The human fleet is here," she told a group of young Nexari scientists as she guided them into a pod. "You're going to be safe now." Commander Krextar made one final desperate attempt to prevent the rescue. He had found another weapon and was trying to shoot at the escape pods. But Lieutenant Colonel Yoon was ready for him. "This ends now," Yoon said as he tackled the Vorthak commander one last time. The fight was brief, but intense. Krextar was larger and had more arms, but Yoon had better training and the advantage of zero-gravity combat experience. When it was over, the Vorthak commander was unconscious and floating harmlessly near the ceiling. "All hostages evacuated," Sergeant Bo-Ra reported. 307 being safe in escape pods. "Confirmed," added Private Song. "No casualties among the hostages. Several minor injuries, but nothing serious." Ambassador Park was the last person to leave Conference Hall Alpha. As she floated toward the final escape pod, she looked back at the scene of chaos. 30 Vorthak guards were still spinning helplessly in zero gravity, their weapons scattered and useless. "Justice has been served," she said quietly. then sealed the escape pod door behind her. Outside the station, the human fleet had achieved complete victory. The Vorthak warships, caught by surprise and outfought, were either destroyed or surrendering. The terrorist threat to Nexus Prime was over. As her escape pod flew toward the safety of Harmony's Edge, Ambassador Park smiled for the first time in 3 days. Humanity had proven that standing on principle didn't mean sacrificing innocent lives. Sometimes it meant saving them. 3 hours after the rescue, Captain Lee Tae-ho stood on the bridge of Harmony's Edge watching the last Vorthak warship surrender to the human fleet. The alien vessel had stopped firing and was broadcasting surrender signals on all frequencies. Its captain had finally realized that continuing to fight would only mean more death. "Captain, we're receiving a communication from the surrendering Vorthak ship," reported his communications officer. "Put it through," Captain Lee replied. The voice that came through the speakers belonged to Commander Krextar, though he sounded very different from before. His voice was weak and filled with confusion. "Human Captain, I demand to know how you could sacrifice innocent lives so callously. How could you risk 300 beings for your principles?" Captain Lee was quiet for a moment, then pressed the communication button. "Commander, we didn't sacrifice anyone, we saved everyone. That's the difference between terrorists and soldiers." "Impossible," Krextar replied. "Our intelligence said humans were soft. You value individual lives above military objectives. You should have surrendered to save the hostages." "You're right that we value individual lives," Captain Lee said calmly. "That's exactly why we couldn't give you what you wanted. If we had surrendered to your demands today, how many more innocents would have died in your future attacks? How many worlds would you have conquered with our shield technology?" There was a long silence before Krextar spoke again. "We studied your species for months. We knew you would give in to save innocent lives. It works with every other species." "Every other species doesn't have humanity's history," Captain Lee replied. "We learned long ago that negotiating with terrorists only creates more terrorism. The only way to stop people like you is to show them that their tactics don't work." Admiral Kim Da-eun's voice came through the communication system from her flagship. "All Vorthak vessels, this is Admiral Kim of the Human Defense Fleet. You are now prisoners of war. You will be treated according to Galactic law, fed properly and given medical care. But you will also be held accountable for your crimes against innocent beings." In the medical bay of Harmony's Edge, Dr. Han So-young was treating the rescued hostages. Most of them were in good health, though many showed signs of stress and exhaustion. She moved from bed to bed, checking each being and offering comfort in their native languages. Ambassador Tella's daughter Kira was sitting up in her medical bed when Dr. Han approached. The young Zelani woman had tears in her eyes, but they were tears of relief and gratitude. "Doctor, I need to thank the humans who saved us," Kira said. "When the Vorthak first took us prisoner, I thought we were all going to die. Then when I heard that humanity refused to negotiate, I was scared that you didn't care about our lives." Dr. Han sat down beside the bed. "But now you understand why we made that choice?" "Yes," Kira replied. "If you had given the Vorthak what they wanted, they would have used it to hurt more people. Your refusal to negotiate wasn't about not caring for our lives. It was about caring for all the lives that would be lost in the future." Across the medical bay, the Karathi trade representative was talking with Private Song Woo-jin, who had helped rescue him from the station. "A young soldier? In all my years of diplomatic work, I have never seen anything like what your people did today." "We just did our job, sir," Song replied modestly. "No, you did much more than that. You showed the galaxy that it's possible to stand up to bullies without becoming bullies yourselves. You proved that having principles doesn't make you weak." Meanwhile, Ambassador Park Ji-won was in a secure communication room talking with representatives from all 12 species whose people had been rescued. The conversation was being broadcast live to their home worlds, and billions of beings across the galaxy were watching. "Ambassador Park," said the Nexari Prime Minister, "my people want to formally thank humanity for saving our scientists, but we also want to understand your government's decision process. How did you know the rescue would succeed?" Park thought carefully before answering. "Prime Minister, we didn't know it would succeed. There was always a chance that our rescue attempt would fail and all the hostages would die. But we knew with certainty that if we gave in to terrorist demands, more people would suffer in the future. The Zelani president spoke next. Ambassador, some of our people are saying that humans took an enormous risk with other people's lives. How do you respond to that criticism? President Vela, I understand why some beings feel that way. But consider this question. If your daughter was taken hostage by criminals who demanded that you release all the prisoners in your jails, would you do it? Would you let thousands of dangerous criminals go free to save one person, even someone you love dearly? President Vela was quiet for a moment. I see your point. Releasing criminals would put many more innocent people at risk. Exactly. Vorthak demanded our military withdrawal and our defensive technology. Giving them those things would have made them strong enough to conquer dozens of worlds and enslave millions of beings. We couldn't save 300 lives by condemning millions of others. 2 days later, Ambassador Park stood before the full Galactic Council Assembly. Representatives from over 100 species filled the massive chamber, and her speech was being broadcast to every world in known space. Honored delegates, Park began, the events at Nexus Prime have taught us an important lesson. For too long, we have allowed fear of immediate harm to cloud our judgment about long-term consequences. When terrorists threaten innocents, our first instinct is to give them what they want to save those lives. She paused and looked around the chamber. But this approach only encourages more terrorism. Every time we surrender to these tactics, we tell violent beings that threatening innocents is an effective way to get what they want. The Karathi delegate stood up. Ambassador Park, are you suggesting that all species should adopt humanity's no-negotiation policy? I'm suggesting that we all need to think carefully about the message we send when we reward terrorism. The Vorthak chose Nexus Prime because they believed threatening innocent lives would force us to surrender. They were wrong about humanity, and we need to make sure they're wrong about everyone else too. Dr. Song Yoon-ji, who had identified the station's design flaws that made the rescue possible, was watching the broadcast from Earth. She smiled as Park continued her speech. Starting today, the Galactic Council will adopt new protocols for dealing with terrorist threats. We will not negotiate with those who threaten innocents. We will not reward violence with political concessions. And we will work together to ensure that every species has the ability to rescue their people when they are taken hostage. The vote was unanimous. Every species in the Galactic Council agreed to humanity's no-negotiation policy. 6 months later, the Vorthak Empire had completely collapsed. Without their primary tool of expansion through terrorism, their military commanders turned on each other. The worlds they had conquered rose up in rebellion, inspired by humanity's example at Nexus Prime. Former victims of Vorthak aggression found the courage to resist oppression. The rescue had shown them that bullies could be defeated when good beings stood together and refused to be intimidated. Captain Lee Tae-ho received a message from Admiral Kim with the final report. The galaxy was more peaceful than it had been in decades. Terrorism as a political tool had become almost extinct, because every species now knew it wouldn't work. As he read the report, Captain Lee thought about the choice humanity had made at Nexus Prime. They had risked everything to prove that doing the right thing was more important than taking the easy path. The rescue had saved more than 300 hostages. It had saved the idea that good principles were worth fighting for, even when the cost seemed too high to bear. In the end, humanity's refusal to negotiate with terrorists had sent the strongest possible message to the galaxy. Bullies and murderers would never be rewarded for their crimes, no matter who they threatened or what they demanded. The age of galactic terrorism was over, and a new era of true peace had begun.